In this video, we're going to tie a fly called the Holy Grail emerger. First thing we're going to do is start with a Tiemco 2487 or 2457 hook. The 2457 is just a heavy gauge hook, which we'll be using today. Holds up on larger fish. The next thing you're going to use is also a brass bead. Today we're going to tie a size 12 with a 7/64 bead. Now when we tie in our thread, we're going to need to leave a little bit of space up at the head of this fly. You can see here I want about that much space in front of the bead. I want that to basically be where the hackle is, and it's going to be about a hook eye's length away from the front of the hook. So all I'm going to really do is just kind of measure out where I need that space, or basically where I want that bead to sit, and then I'm going to take my thread and start it right there, and that'll kind of be my gauge as I tie the fly. If you don't have a gauge, a lot of times you can crowd the eye and tie a little too far forward, and then you can't really go backwards. So that's about the distance I want away from the eye. Just use my thread as a marker. In this fly, I like to invert it just a little bit when I tie in the kind of back half of the body. We're going to use some Veevus 14-aught red thread for this fly. The first material we're going to tie in is some Pearlescent tinsel. We're going to use the small size. You can also use like a strand of Mirage Flashaboo or something like that. That works fine as well. But we're just going to use a single little strand of small Pearlescent tinsel, and we're going to tie it in right there at the bend. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to dub the body. This fly can be tied in several different colors, but the natural color is probably the most common, the most popular, so that's what we'll tie today. It can also be tied in olive and black. Those are also two pretty popular colors. So I'm going to dub just with some natural Hareline hare's ear dubbing. I'm just going to start there right at the back, and I'm just going to taper a body forward, kind of gradually getting thicker and thicker as I work my way forward on the fly. You can use a little bit of dubbing wax to help you with the shaggy dubbing. Sometimes natural hare's ear dubbing can be a little spiky, a little tough to manage and get to dub nice and tight, so a little wax sometimes helps. And I like my Holy Grail emergers to be somewhat chunky. If you've seen a caddis larva in the water or an emerger in the water, they're not a slender insect like a mayfly. It's a little chunky, so don't be afraid to dub a little bit thicker body than you would on like a mayfly or a pheasant tail or something like that. Put a little bit more dubbing on there, but try to tastefully taper it. You don't want to just slap it all on there and have big lumps and clumps end up on the body of the fly, so keep tapering it. Now we're going to work our way forward. We're going to leave a little bit of space. You can see I still have some red thread showing through right there. I want to leave about a bead's length of red thread still showing on my thorax, but I want to taper that body basically right up to it. So I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to take my tinsel and I'm going to actually wrap it the opposite way that I wrapped my dubbing. Basically I'm going to counter wrap it. I might trim it a little shorter here. There we go. Counter wrap it around the body. This will help it stand out. If you wrap it the same way around the shank of the hook, it'll just kind of disappear in your dubbing. So you need to counter wrap it. Then you can capture it, trim it out of there, fluff up the body a little bit. Now the next thing we're going to tie in is just some pheasant tail. This will be the casing for this fly. I'm going to take a fairly generous chunk here, about a dozen or so fibers. I'm going to trim off the tips. exposing a nice blunt end. And I'm going to tie them in by the tips, right on top of the shank of the hook, and right up to kind of the back portion of my body. Now we're ready to dub the thorax, and same dubbing, just some natural hare's ear. And add a little more dubbing to this section of the fly than you would on the back half, because we need to build up a nice bulky thorax here. We want it to be larger than the back half of the fly, a little rounder as well, just kind of a nice midsection to the fly. We want it to be larger, just a little larger than our bead. Be careful to still leave some space. You can see there I'm still leaving some slop or some space for my bead. You do not want to go too far forward. Alright, once we have, we'll just add a little more. Once you have your thorax ready, which I almost did, I just want to add a little more right up front there. Perfect. You can take your thread, and we're basically going to jump it over the top of our bead, just like so. You can invert your hook up a little bit, then we're going to take that pheasant tail, pull it right over the top, and capture it right in front of the bead. And trim out the extra fibers. Helps at this point if you do invert the fly a little up, since this hook is curved. If you don't invert it, you're not really on a flat kind of surface. The next material is my favorite part of the fly. It's also can be the most frustrating as well. That is the soft hackle, or the collar. And we're going to use Partridge for this. It really helps to buy yourself a #1 grade Partridge skin, so you get these perfect clean tipped feathers. If you buy the loose packs, the feathers aren't nearly as good a quality. Thus, they're a lot more difficult to work with. I'm just going to strip off all the fluff. Then I'm going to take the tip of the feather. And I like to always use my hackle pliers to just kind of clip into the very tip and stroke the majority of the fibers kind of back and out of the way, just exposing the very tip of that feather. And that's what we're going to tie it in by. It's just by the tip. So I'm just going to take it and creep my thread in there and lay down a few wraps to secure it. Then you can get in there with your scissors, trim off that excess. Now the next thing we're going to do is clip into our partridge feather as carefully as you can. Then take all the fibers and gently kink them and stroke them back, and then we're ready to make our first wrap. Very carefully, you're going to just wrap that partridge around the head of the fly, one wrap right in front of the other. If you're not used to working with partridge, don't get frustrated. It does break very, very easily, so you have to be very kind of careful not to pull too hard, but also place the wraps exactly where you want them to go. Trim out the stem, and I'm going to pull it all back, and I'm going to lay down just a few wraps up against at Partridge. Whip finish. And that is a Holy Grail Caddis emerger. Very deadly little fly. Fishes great as a point fly. I've caught fish on the swing on this fly. I've caught fish dead drifting it. You can fish it behind a woolly bugger. Very versatile fly. A lot of guides also like this fly. It's a very forgiving fly to fish. But that is the Holy Grail Caddis emerger.